All right, so why don't we jump right into our first topic of the day? What was our headline? Yes, Apple launches the new iPhone SE for $399 US. So I guess we're going to end up calling this the iPhone SE 2020 because
Yeah.
that's kind of what we've resorted to for deciphering Apple's horrible naming scheme. You know what? Just to kind of stick it to them, I really wish consumers and the media would all band together and start using like the really horrible part numbers that actually do
Oh my
exist for these products, just to be like, look, unless you start calling things something that makes any sense, this is what we're going to do. And the infuriating thing about it is that Apple clearly understands that products need names that allow consumers to easily differentiate one from the other. That's why it's called iPhone 10, iPhone 11. And yet other departments seem to completely not get the memo. Like the iPhone department, and that's inexplicable because the other iPhone department seems to have it all sorted out where they're like, oh yeah, the iPhone SE. How about iPhone TE? Third edition. Or I don't know. I don't
That would
know what the
even
answer is.
that would even sound cool to me.
iPhone SE2.
TE.
SE2. It doesn't matter. Just something so that when people are talking about the product, you know what they're talking about. It's like, yeah, I got a MacBook Air. That could be any computer. That could be an ancient piece of garbage or a brand new piece of garbage. Like, it could be anything. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
Yeah, man. Yeah, for
okay,
sure.
in fairness, actually, we just wrapped up our review of the new MacBook Air. It's a lot better. So it's still limited to a 10-watt cooling solution, which means that that quad-core chip in there is not able to stretch its legs in the way that competing solutions from HP and Dell are. But it's a quad core, which means that you actually like can get some real multitasking done with it compared to the last gen one, which in 2019 was still limited to a dual core design only. So I still would have liked to see the fan, which is present in the computer, actually cooling the CPU. That's a weird one. Okay, it's got a fan. Fan does not appear to have any direct contact with the CPU heatsink. So it's
What does
just
it do?
we're not I don't well, it doesn't cool the CPU, so there's that.
Isn't that
It
like the only thing that would bottleneck on that?
I think it cools the whole system. I think Apple just decided that instead of connecting a heat pipe or like a vapor chamber directly from the CPU to the fan and like have a heat sink there, it's more about just like overall system airflow. So they're making sure that all the components of the board get cooled. Now they could have done that while also putting heatsink fins next to it and running a heat pipe to the CPU, but they
Yeah.
opted not to do that. So that's the design decision that they made, and it's still it's still a MacBook Air. Feels great. It's not flexible or anything like that. It's got a lot of things
That's
going for it.
yeah.
Just could use better cooling, but at least it's got a quad core processor now. Anyway, back to people who didn't get the memo. The iPhone SE. So it's $400. So it's got exactly the same name as the 2016 iPhone SE, and this is pretty cool. It's got the same price. And when you consider that 2016, the last time that Apple saw fit to make a budget iPhone was 4 years ago.
And a
Um,
lot more people were employed.
well, okay, that's a fair point, but accounting for inflation, this is effectively cheaper than the original
Cheaper. Yeah.
iPhone SE, and it is a lot more phone for the money. So the specs are actually similar internally to the iPhone 11. So it's got the same Bionic A13 7 nanometer plus processor. I love that industry trend. We don't have a new manufacturing process, so we're just going to put pluses on things. The same 64, 128, and even 256 gig storage option. I am really surprised to see a 256 gig storage option on the iPhone SE. That basically means to me that this is less of a replacement for the original SE and more just an acknowledgement that there are markets like India and America that need cheaper phones, and still want to have Apple as an option, but simply cannot afford a flagship current gen iPhone. So this is a way for them to basically make a budget phone, but not cannibalize their existing flagship ones,
Yeah.
and just effectively just put the same hardware that they know people want. They know people want a lot of storage. Just because you only have $400 compared to someone who can afford a proper iPhone with $1,000 doesn't mean you don't want to take a lot of pictures. It's even got wireless charging. That's something that I was pretty impressed to see. Stereo audio with loudspeaker. That's really nice to have when you're watching videos on the go. No headphone jack, of course.
One thing I would like to throw in is there's a
Yeah.
red edition, and the original, like the first red edition iPhone that they released was, I think, one of the like best looking phones I had ever seen at the time.
Oh yeah,
So
it
it
was hot.
probably looks great. And proceeds go towards the fight against COVID-19. So that's cool.
That's pretty cool. All right, so that all sounded real great so far for the iPhone SE 2020 edition.
Yes.
There are some important cost-cutting measures compared to the iPhone 11 in order to hit that $400 price point. It has an 1821 milliamp hour battery. I don't remember the last Android phone that had a sub 2000 milliamp hour battery. And here's the thing that just kind of, boggles my mind a little bit when I look at phone pricing. Now, I fully understand that when you look at the BOM cost, the bill of materials cost of a device like a phone, it's really not as simple as just, well, I don't know, it should be that plus, some reasonable markup, let's say 20%. It's not that simple. There's a lot of R&D that goes into creating a phone, and there's a lot of support that goes into moving a product out into the channel and training your salespeople and your customer service people and your technicians and all that. Like there's all these costs associated with bringing a product to market, except for one small problem. A lot of them are kind of fixed costs. So the, what, $1, $3? Let's be generous. Let's say it's $5 extra to make that a 2500 milliamp hour battery. I get that it's not as simple as making the phone $405.
Yeah.
How about $409.99? I get you want to hit a price point or whatever, but like personally, I would take 2500, like slightly bigger battery over a wireless Qi charging option.
The smaller screen and no Face ID sensors will help with the battery a little bit, but nowhere near the gap that has been created by the lack of capacity.
Yeah, not even close. Because you got to remember too, guys, like wireless charging is still, even though I suspect that Apple is taking a much safer approach to it than some manufacturers, like I think Oppo has 40-watt wireless charging at this point, and OnePlus just launched a phone with 30-watt wireless charging that in order to use it, you actually have to use their wireless charger, which has a cooling fan in it that blows across the back of the phone. Like Apple's taking a relatively conservative approach to wireless charging, but the fact that I've got wireless charging, which inherently creates more heat in the battery and therefore will make it not last as long. Maybe Apple has determined through their $1 billion a month R&D budget that it's not too bad, but this is a feature that will make your battery last less long by some amount. And in order to have it, we now have an 1800 milliamp hour battery. That's absolutely brutal.
Someone in Twitch chat, and I think a few other people as well, have said that the Project Red iPhone is raising money to fight AIDS. I believe that is generally correct for Product Red launches, but if you look on Apple's website, it says specifically under it, right next to the Project Red logo, every iPhone SE Project Red purchased new contributes directly to the global fund to combat COVID-19.
Some other spec differences here: 3 gigs versus 4 gigs of RAM, 7 megapixel front camera, so it's a little less than the 12 megapixel unit on the iPhone 11. So there's no 4K video support on the front, and there's no ultra-wide rear camera, just a single rear camera similar to the main camera on the iPhone 11. That should still be a pretty darn decent main camera. Remember, it is still an iPhone. In a nod, so I know a lot of people are really upset that the iPhone SE is not small. People thought the iPhone SE was Apple's nod to people who don't want gigantic phones. As it turns out, it's not. It's Apple's nod to people who don't want whatever current feature they're pushing and need a little bit more time to adjust, I guess. So you're stuck with a big phone. And I say big relatively speaking, like the screen's not that big, but the phone itself is much larger than the old iPhone SE. But what you're not stuck with is Face ID. So if you don't like notches and you don't like facial recognition for whatever reason, you can go back to using a front-facing touch sensor. So it's got fingerprint sensor in the more traditional iPhone spot and no notch.
What do you think?
I think they're going to sell boatloads of them. I'm the only thing that I look at and I go, yeah, I don't know how I could possibly recommend this to, my auntie or whatever else, is that battery.
The battery, yeah.
Now, Apple has excellent battery management, and it's possible that Bionic A13 is clocked lower. So we don't necessarily know that this phone actually performs the same as an iPhone 11. We just know that it has the same processor. So it is possible that it will be more efficient, that the smaller display will help. But I would have liked to see at least a 2400 class, 2500, 2600 milliamp hour battery in this thing. Other than that, I think it's a fantastic entry level into the iPhone ecosystem because it's priced so low that if you're in a market that does carrier subsidized like payment plan type of phone deals, this is easily right out of the gate, brand new when it launches. This is a $0 phone on a 2-year plan basically, or like $100 phone or whatever the case may be.
I think I saw somewhere trade-ins for $229 or something. Like if you trade in your phone, you can get this one for 200 and something.
Yeah, that's pretty sick. And you guys, like, the thing is, there's a lot of people who just, it doesn't actually matter what's out there on the Android side of things. They want an iPhone, and so Apple didn't have to give them a cheaper option, I guess.
To be fair, while they might not like to admit it, I think that's probably maybe not just as true, but probably close to just as true on the Android side. No matter what Apple has to offer, they're going to stick with Android.
You should have seen the toxicity in the comments. You should have seen the toxicity in the comments on my
Apple fanboy Linus.
Yes, yeah, exactly. On my S20 Ultra video, it's still covered in those comments. Like, it's just pathetic how much of an Apple fanboy this is. No, it's pathetic how much you actually, how desperately you want to remove the splinter from my eye without noticing the 2x4 sticking out of yours.
Which one do you think you've used more? Which platform?
Android by a long shot at this point.
That's what I thought, but I know you've used quite a bit of
iOS. I used my iPhone 4 for like 3 years, and then I actually went from that to Windows Phone of all things because I was doing like a review of something, and then that was terrible. And then I was pretty much Android until, which one was it? I think it was the 6S was the one that got me back on the iPhone. The 6S was a freaking outstanding phone. I might have, I might have daily driven the 6 before the 6S. 6S was awesome. 6 was excellent. And then they haven't won me back since then.
The 6 sold a ton too. That was an extremely ubiquitous phone. The 6S?
Yeah. Both of them were like kind of awesome. I'm trying to find how long they actually updated the old iPhone SE with iOS.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a matrix for how long Apple iOS support matrix support. Oh yeah, here it is. Here's a really good one. I don't have a quick and easy way to screen share this with you guys, unfortunately, but one of the other factors to consider when we talk about budget phones is not just how much you spend on the phone, but also how much value you're getting out of the phone. Like, I like to look at things in terms of like what it costs per unit of time that I actually get to use it. So if we look back at the original iPhone SE, here we go. So that puppy started out with, looks like, I want to say iOS 9.3.
Sorry for glaring at the camera. My I'm not using a webcam anymore. That's also why it's higher when I'm looking up. But the screen just like got a lot brighter and an icon started flashing on it. I was like, what the heck's happening? I still don't know, but I'm just not going to worry about it.
Shoot. And of course, I'm going on the site and the bloody... So now I don't know what iPhone SE it's talking about. Like already. So support.apple.com/en-ca/guide/iPhone/ a bunch of gibberish/iOS. There's a list of supported iPhone models, and I actually have to click on it to see that, yes, that is in fact the original iPhone SE.
Oh.
Apple, you do this to yourselves. You do it to yourselves, and you don't have to. It's completely unnecessary. So
Basically,
yes.
every app that like lists what phones it supports is going to be confusing until it gets updated.
So yeah, so the iPhone SE is still apparently supported on iOS 13, and I don't know if it's going to get. See now, how do I look it up? iPhone SE iOS 14 support? Like I don't know. Do we know? Thinking why you should have good. Anyway, it's frustrating. So anyway, anyone who bought the iPhone SE at launch got a solid 4 years out of their device. And if you're willing to forego the latest version of iOS for a year, you can probably get away with that. I'd say 2 years, you're starting to push it in terms of app compatibility. If you also have other gadgets in your life, you're going to run into like app developers that are like, yeah, look, you kind of need to be on a current device. We can't keep maintaining 4 different forks of our software for people who dropped off at various levels of iOS. Yeah, you done goofed. You need to go a little bit to your right.
That.
Point it to your right, a little more, a little more, a little more, a little more. Yeah, there you go. It looks beautiful.
Okay.
You're gorgeous.
All right. I will make it better next time, not this time.
So I know we kind of mocked it in the title of the video. I think it's a pretty solid way to go if you don't like Face ID. Like they at least haven't nerfed the performance. I hate the battery. I think the battery is kind of the FU to make sure that people who can afford something else don't buy it.
That's pretty much the only thing on here I could see someone complaining about. It is notably smaller as well. 4.7 inch versus 6.1 inch.
All right, so there you go. That's the iPhone SE. I'll be working on a review of it. I mean, the big thing is just going to be like, how good is that camera? How long does that battery life last? Those are the 2 questions to answer. I suspect the camera will be fine and the battery will be